Hello and welcome. My name is Sarah and you're watching Ko.fabrics channel. This is our free tutorial of the month. Today we are going to be sewing an adjustable linen dress for the summer. I am still trying to name this pattern and at the time this was filmed, but I should have a name soon, so I'm going to insert it here on the screen for you. As always, our patterns are free and can be found for download on our website, ko.fabrics.com. If you like this tutorial, feel free to like and subscribe. And even buying one of our kits that are for this pattern on our website. The sales from our site keep this tutorial and pattern shop going. So this pattern is based on a sketch I did during the Capsule Wardrobe planning video, which I will link below if you want to check that out. So this dress needed, if you watched our Capsule Wardrobe video, you'll know that this dress needed a few specific things in order for me to consider it for this project. The first was size adjustability. I've had a lot of weight fluctuations, up a size, down a size this year. And I'm so tired of taking out my pants and feeling uncomfortable in my clothing. And so I wanted that is a key problem I wanted to solve when I was drafting this pattern. The second was I wanted it to be somewhat modest. So I want to be able to wear it to work. And I also want it to be nice enough that I can wear it out on the weekend or to the park or to a nice dinner. And you'll see I'm currently wearing this dress now. It's very cute. I love it on. So hopefully I achieved that. And third, I did not want a wrap dress. Wrap dresses take so much fabric to make, and I wanted this to be a relatively affordable project if this is your first project. So although you will need a couple yards of fabric, I didn't want you to have to buy 5 or 6 yards of fabric like most wrap dresses require. And then lastly, I wanted this to have options for no closures so that if you're not comfortable with buttons, you can make this pattern without buttons, and allow it to be something that you can pull over your head in the morning. So I can pull this dress on over my head. I don't have to zip it or button it. I do have a tie in the back, so I do have to tie the back tight, but that does give it a very nice waistline. Now, luckily, you don't need to draft this thing since I've already done that part for you. But if you are someone who loves drafting and you want to do that yourself, you can. The way you want to do the drafting portion is split your dart between the side and the bottom dart area. And then you're going to close the side dart when you're sewing and leave the bottom dart open. If you don't have much of a bust, you might be able to just move your dart to the bottom so you don't have a side dart at all. Then you need to add about 1 inch ease to each bodice piece. I split my ease between the underarm, where I added a 1/2 inch, and another 1/2 inch in the middle of the bodice. I didn't add it to the shoulder, so I just cut up the pattern and split it a little bit. Then you can test your mock-up and make sure that you can get it over your head without an issue. If all of that's good, then you're good to make a circle skirt using the circle skirt calculator. So I did, I think I did a 1.5 my waist size, and I did use a 1/2 circle skirt in order to make this. For this pattern, you will also need a few materials. And if you are a beginner and you're unsure of what to buy, you can head over to our website. We have set up a kit specifically for this pattern so that you don't have to guess how much fabric you need or what supplies you need. You can simply tell us what fabric you want. It'll already work with this pattern, and it will ship it directly to you. If you want to pick out your own fabric or make this with fabric you already have in your stash, you're going to need about 3 yards of fabric total. That's for sizes X small to about a large. And then if you are over a large, you might want to go ahead and bump up to a 3.5 yard just to be safe. If you like above the knee skirts, you can probably reduce your total yardage down by about a 1/2 yard, just because the skirt length takes up so much of the yardage. You're also going to need interfacing. I like to use sew-in interfacing, but you can also use iron-on interfacing. You need a strip about that wide, 2.5 inches or so, maybe less, of interfacing that is a little larger than your waistband. So do your waistband size plus 4 or 5 inches, and that's more than enough. You're gonna need 4 buttons, matching thread, and then if you wanna make a mock-up, which I recommend you do, you're gonna want some muslin or scrap material so that you can test out just the bodice piece to make sure it fits you well. You're also gonna need a way to sew this, so either a hand sewing kit or a sewing machine, an iron, and scissors. If you want to hand sew this pattern, you certainly can. Most of my instructions for this are machine sewing, but I do a little bit of hand sewing for areas where I just prefer to hand sew. So you'll see a little bit of both in this video. And then lastly, you need the pattern. So head on over to ko.fabrics, download the pattern, print it out. You can match up the little cross hatches in the corner and tape it together. I recommend taping it together either on the floor or if you want a little bit of backlight, if you have a screen door or a window that you can tape it on, it really helps to line up the cross hatches. So with that, let's get sewing. All right, so the first thing you're going to do with this pattern is make a muslin. A muslin is going to ensure that the fit of the pattern is right for your body and that we don't need to adjust or recut anything out. While I finish making this mock-up, go ahead and go download the pattern and the instructions. Our instructions have a little tag for the steps that you need to take to make a muslin. So if you've never made a muslin before, we try to make it really easy for you to see which steps you need to do in order to make your mock-up. And we give a couple tips on how to cut out the pattern so that you don't waste any fabric if you're worried about waste for your muslin while you're testing your fit as well. So go ahead and do that, and then here in just a second we'll get going with all of our main steps for this project, and you can use those steps as well to make your muslin and then repeat them to make your project. So as you can see here, I'm using this kind of dress form to figure out if the neckline was right on this, but I also tested if the bodice went over my head correctly. So did I have enough ease in the waistline to get the bodice up over my head, over my bust without any issues? If that bust is too tight, what I'm gonna do is either cut a size up if the whole bodice is too tight, or I'm gonna take the waistline measurement and I'm gonna draw a line from under the bust to a larger size so that I can fit the waistline over my head and over my bust. Now, any pattern alterations you'll need to make to your pattern. So here you can see I changed that neckline, I cut that out, changed it on my pattern. And similarly, so if you adjust the waistband, you'll need to cut a larger waistband as well to make sure that fits over your head. So don't just cut the top, cut the waistband as well in the larger size. All right, so let's cut these patterns out of our good fabric. We have layout instructions on our pattern instructions for you. So following the grain lines, you're going to lay out your patterns and cut them out. And make sure you mark all of your darts and trim all of your corners in the same way that we did for our muslin. Next, we are going to stay stitch. So I want you to stay stitch the rounded corners of the neckline and the armholes. This prevents these areas from stretching out as you sew. They will get worked a lot over the course of you making this pattern, so it just prevents any stretching from happening as you're going along. And then we're going to pin our darts. So you can see me here, I'm taking my pen, pinning it through the line and checking if it's going through the line on the other side. Once I pin it and it's all lined up, I'm going to sew along that line. And I usually do a 2 stitch length with a straight stitch here. And then as I get closer, what you'll see me do is kind of stop and turn my dial. And actually I got a little bit too close, so I backed up. And then I'm going to turn my dial down to a 1 and then stitch off the edge. You can also stitch pretty close to the edge and then go to a 0 and do a couple stitches at 0 just to secure the thread. We like to push our darts towards gravity, so we're going to push our darts down on the bust. Then we are going to push our darts we're going to push our darts away from the shoulder at the shoulder seam. So next thing I'm going to do, and I do this a little out of order just because I was testing this pattern out as I was filming. So make sure you're checking the instructions for our download as you're following along, just to do all of these things in the kind of most efficient order instead of I'm learning how to put this thing together order. So you're going to fold in your interfacing and then fold in again. And you see I am folding it in and I'm realizing I cut my interfacing short, so I fold that out just so I don't have to recut interfacing. But you should have enough interfacing that you don't have to do this. So leave it folded in on the interfacing and then fold it in again. You can actually just go ahead and pin this and stitch it down if you'd like. I took an extra step of basting it here. So the reason I did that was I wanted to fold this up while this thing is flat and easy to work with. But I hadn't tested the fit of the bodice, the final bodice yet, so I wanted to test the fit and make sure everything was perfect before I sewed that placket down and had less wiggle room. And the great thing about basting is even if you do it and it's a little extra work, it makes sewing the placket in place later so much easier. It's so efficient and just works. All right, next we're going to sew our shoulder seams and our side seams. So go ahead and pin your shoulders and pin your side seams and then take those over to the sewing machine and just zip them together. You can finish those edges on both of these, on the shoulders and the side seams, with either a serger, a zigzag stitch, or a overlock stitch on your sewing machine. And if you're using your regular sewing machine, what I recommend is with the zigzag or overlock, zigzag into the fabric on one side and then just off the fabric on the other side, and it kind of holds everything in place very nicely. All right, and here we are going ahead and tacking down that placket. So we're sewing about an inch away from the edge here, trying to keep that nice and even. And it's pretty even. It turned out all right. So we'll pull out our basting stitches now, which if you use cotton thread for this, it makes it so much easier to pull out the basting stitches, because if you kind of give it a little tug, it can break. I've been using this very specific cotton basting thread, which has been awesome. All right, so we picked out some buttons and we are going to mark our buttonholes. Our buttonholes here, you have a paper that you can just put down on your size and trace the buttonholes out, lining them up to the dot on the bottom. So it should make it super easy for you to do that. And then I have a 3-step buttonholer machine, so I have to go do a zigzag down, a zigzag for the top and the bottom, and then a zigzag back up on my machine. If you have a 1-step buttonholer, you can just kind of put your buttonhole down, put your buttonhole in your foot, and hit go, and your machine will do it for you. But if you're like me and you have to mark out the size of your buttonholes, for a 1/2 inch buttonhole, I usually do a an additional 1/4 of an inch on the buttons. I used to do 1/8, but I found it just ends up being kind of bulky and hard to push the button through. So for all you math people out there, that means my 1/2 inch buttonhole is going to equate to a 3/4 of an inch buttonhole size. That way my button fits through really easily and I don't have to kind of worry about it not having enough space. Next, we're going to tack this front together. So line up your dots, pin it, and just do a little basting stitch here to keep this front together. And that way, when we add the waistbands, I don't have to fiddle with it. It's already kind of secured. Now, don't be like me and sew your buttons on way too early. Save this for the end. So come back after you've watched this video all the way through and watch how we attach our buttons. I just use a regular button attaching method of one string going up and down multiple times. You can use embroidery thread here. You can also double up your string. I just prefer to do one and do it a lot, and that's it. Sewing your buttons on too soon. The reason this is not recommended is because you want to make sure that your bias tape has been added to the neckline before you add your buttons. So if you haven't added your bias tape yet, go add your bias tape to your neckline and then you can sew on your buttons. It makes your life so much easier. You don't have to avoid them when you're sewing later, and you'll see what I mean here in a couple steps. Also, did you know you can use your seam ripper to open your buttonholes? I sewed for 1.5 years or more before I realized that. So, fun tip, use your seam ripper, open up your buttonholes. On to the waistband. So go ahead and make all of your waistbands, including your interfacing waistband, which you will not see me make because I did not add one to my dress, but we will be adding one in this pattern. It will help make this pattern look a lot better in the end, and I highly recommend it. So all of the waistbands together, you will have 3 total, 1 outside, 1 inside, and 1 interfaced. If you are using fusible interfacing, you can go ahead and just fuse the interfacing to one of your waistbands, and then sew that waistband together. What you're seeing here is, instead of doing what I'm doing with this fabric, you're going to line the waistband on the inside with the interfacing. So if you've fused your interfacing, don't have to worry about this. You're using sew-in interfacing, just line those 2 pieces up and kind of baste them together so that they stay together, or pin them together so they stay together. And then we want to make sure those holes are lined up. Now, on the outside waistband, so this outside waistband has the interfacing on one side. On the other side of the interfacing, we're going to put scrap fabric. Ideally, scrap fabric in the color of the fabric you are using, so use any scraps you have that cover the whole area. I tried to use some that went a little past my waistband, and I wanted to make sure that the grain line kind of lined up. So you can see I'm putting it at an angle here just because my grain line wasn't running directionally on this. So I tried to line it up so that the grain line went with the hole, just to make it a little easier later on. And then doesn't really matter which side as long as you have the holes marked, go ahead and sew around the boxes. And I do a double, so I go around twice because I'm a scaredy cat and I wasn't sure that once was enough. So we're going to do it twice, just to make sure everything's good. And then you'll see me back tack here just to secure everything at the last step. Then you'll see I'm marking these little directionals towards the corners just to make my life easier. And then I'm going to cut a little hole in the middle, and then I'm going to clip from that hole to the corners. Do not clip through the corner, clip to it. And then I'm going to trim all this fabric away so it's less bulky. As much as I can, I'm going to trim it down. Now this is the fun part. So those scrap fabrics on the other side, this scrap fabric, push that scrap fabric through the hole we just made. Okay, and it's going to look like a hot mess. It's going to look gross. It's not going to look good. It's going to look terrible. It's going to look like that, where it looks bananas. What you need to do is hold it. So you see how I'm kind of pressing it flat with my hand, holding it, and then I'm going to press it. You can pull on it, get it nice and flat as you can, and then press it down, and it's going to look gross on the inside. It's fine. It'll look good on the outside. That's all that matters. Look how nice that looks on the outside. So we did a little bit of a stitch around the hole, secured everything, and now you can see how that kind of scrap fabric interfacing is lining up there. So outside waistband goes on the outside, right sides together, so the outside of the fabric is touching the outside of the fabric. You can see how I'm just kind of lining things up here, kind of pinning them in place. And everything's lining up pretty well, so I'm not pinning a whole lot right yet. So I'm pinning my side seams, kind of just making sure everything's lined up. Getting my middle marks, so I should have a dot that I can line up my middle marks with, or a clip, and that way it's really easy for me to line these things up. And then the inside waistbands, and this is the one without the interfacing, this one's going to go on the inside. You're going to make sure that the right side of that one is facing the inside of the fabric. And so your seam allowance is going to face the inside of the garment. Now that I've got those lined up, I'm going to kind of mark repin any of my notches here, and then I'm just going to go grab a bunch of pins, and I'm going to pin this little sandwich together. If I feel like I have any extra fabric hanging out, I'm going to try to evenly distribute it between kind of all the pins on that side, just to make sure that I'm not getting any tucks as I'm sewing along. And you can baste this together if you want to first, or do what I do and just go ahead and sew it. I like to sew with the outside waistband facing down, so that the feed dogs, the little feet on the machine, make sure that that outside layer is nice and smooth and I don't get any tucks. Now we're going to keep the inside waistband folded up, and my outside waistband, which should have my interfacing and my holes on it, I'm going to fold that down and go ahead and give it a press. And we can trim our seam allowance down. So all we need to do here is just take about a 1/4 inch off of the seam allowance, so that there's not a bunch of bulky seam allowance in there later on. If you haven't cut out your skirts, now's the time to do that. So go ahead, grab your fabric again, cut those skirts out. Make sure you're marking all of your dots and darts. If you're like me and your fabric is short, you're going to need to cut the Gore pattern out as well. And so what you're seeing is a little bit of a time warp. I've already added one of the Gores to the skirt here. So you can see how now I have, instead of that cut in, I have like that nice kind of straight-ish line where the skirt will add an additional flare out to it. And so I hand sewed that just because practice is nice sometimes, but I'm going to machine sew the second side. So I like to add a Gore to both sides of one panel of the skirt. And then what you're going to see here is me lining up my second panel, right? Going to line up those clips and go ahead and pin that. Then we will pin the remaining skirt down the rest of that gore. So it's a little weird because it's going to feel like you're kind of angling the skirt down, but I promise in the end you won't notice. That's not something that's going to be noticeable on the garment. It'll actually look very straight because it'll look like a full, I believe this is a half circle skirt that's gathered. So everything will kind of line up. And actually the fun part with this dress is you can see that my pattern went all the way to the selvage. So the selvage edge is hanging out there, and technically I don't have to finish that edge if I don't want to, just because the selvage isn't going to fray. And yeah, this is me struggling to get stuff aligned because I had a little bit of a miscalculation on my pattern with the gore, but we have since fixed that in the final pattern, so you guys don't have to worry about having any kind of loose fabric hanging out up there like I did. All right, so now we're gonna sew all the way down this seam, start to finish. And I think I actually ran out of bobbin midway through, so you can see where my bobbin changes, which is funny. But that seam now goes all the way down, and I need to clip my gore. So I did not proactively clip my gore, so I kind of have to cut in a little bit because I sewed over the selvage a little bit. But you just want to clip to the dot. So the dot on your pattern where the gore tip is, you clip to that and then it'll lay flat. If you don't clip to it, what'll happen is it'll kind of poke out and look a little weird. Just because the selvages can end up kind of sticking and getting sewn together at odd angles. So we're going to talk a little bit about finishing edges. So I think this is one of the only times I show serging in this video. I do typically serge my edges. And you can go all the way down the line since we've clipped that gore. You can go all the way up one of the seams, and then you'll kind of do from the gore down on the other seam. So here we are making bias. So if you haven't made your bias yet, now's the time to do it. You've cut everything else out. You might as well go ahead and make your bias. We are going at a 45-degree angle from the selvage. So this is, or the centerfold, whatever's easier for you. I'm kind of probably using the centerfold here. And I'm just making as many strips as I can. You probably need about 4 or 5 strips. And they are not full length. You know, you kind of see they're smaller strips, maybe anywhere from like 10 inches to 20 inches a piece, just kind of depending on how long of a strip I had. But we're gonna make bias to make our bias neckline and our waistband. So to make your bias, you're gonna kind of strip these together. So starting with your first one, what I like to do is fold under. So you'll see me kind of pick up the fabric and fold the next fabric under, and then line a piece of bias up on the top. You're gonna line that bias up at a 90-degree angle, and then you're gonna sew it from where the intersections are. So kind of across that line so you get a diagonal. The diagonal is really nice because it's more subtle, it's less noticeable, and it's less bulky than a straight line. You can 100% just straight sew these together, not at an angle, and like press your seams flat. It's just a little bit bulkier and a little bit more noticeable, but there's no reason you can't. Now it's time to make double fold bias. So we are going to fold it once and press it down. And then you can see here I'm doing a little trick to make that process a bit easier. You pin 2 needles, run your bias under it. Now to do the second part of this, which is not shown, take the 2 edges and fold them in towards that pressed line we just made, and it'll make adding this bias to your garment so much easier. Next up, we are going to add our bias tape to the neckline and the armholes. We'll follow the same process for both. So pin your bias around the edge of your neckline, starting with the placket and ending with the placket. On both the beginning and the end, you're going to fold over the bias tape to the inside of the garment so that there's a little bit of an overlap and it covers that edge. Next, we're going to sew that in. I'm sewing in 5/8 of an inch. That's what I would recommend you sew in, even if we're making 1/2 inch bias tape. So it'll be just a hair into the quarter fold line. As you go around, you're going to go around the curves a little bit, and I like to leave my bias tape on just a hair loose so that as I fold it to the inside, it doesn't have any issue kind of stretching around the corners. But you can also put it on where it's not loose and it's snug around the edge too. It'll still work exactly the same. So I'm starting to understitch here, but I actually just noticed a tuck in the bias. So I'm unpicking that and just fixing it really quickly. Then we're going to understitch around the neckline. And I messed up filming here, so you don't get to see the whole thing. But to understitch, you're going to stitch on the bias and the seam allowance. That way, the bias folds really nicely towards the inside. And it just makes for a much cleaner neckline than not understitching. So I know it seems a little dumb when you're first getting started. Then we're going to fold. You can kind of see the fold technique where we're going to fold it in once, twice, and then again. And we're going to do that all the way around. So I messed up and didn't make things easy on myself by not doing a double fold bias and only doing single fold. So this is where the double fold comes in handy. So currently you can see me struggling with the fold pin, and then I'll probably press as I go around and make sure that it's all laying nice and flat before I stitch it down. And if you're using double fold bias, it's so much easier. So do it. Make the double fold bias. Now we're stitching all the way around the neckline. I'm stitching about a little under 5/8 of an inch here just to make sure I catch that bias tape. So I want to probably stitch about a 1/2 inch as that's our bias tape width. And I know I missed a few spots, so off camera I will go back, unpick my stitches and re-sew those. So don't worry if you missed a spot or two, it's pretty easy to fix. Alright, so if you want to run gathers, the first thing we're going to do is put our machine on our straight stitch. And then we want to turn this to our largest stitch on our machine. And all we're going to do is run 2 lines. Alright, so today we're marking for our pleats. So what I've done is marked 1/4 of an inch, and then I've drawn 2 lines. So 1 and 2 lines. And all I'm going to do is take some thread and do a running stitch across these 2 lines all the way around my skirt edge, and then I'm going to gather it up. Then a hand sewing your gather. So all you have to do, sew on the lines you just drew around the skirt edge, and again we're going to sew 2 lines of these, and then once we have our 2 lines done, whether you're machine sewing or hand sewing, tie a knot on one end of the gathers, and on the other end do not tie a knot, and then you're going to gather those up, pulling on a string until the gathers are tighter than the waistband. After that, find your kind of notches, dots in front and back, and line up your seams first, and then the notches and dots second. Once they are all lined up and in place, you can start evenly distributing the gathers between all of those markers. All right, next up we need to sew the waistband to the skirt. So I like to sew with the gathers facing down, just because I kind of let the feed dogs do the work for me of dispersing the gathers out as it sews along. You can do it the other way too. You might have a little bit of manual work to make sure the gathers kind of disperse equally and evenly. I like to typically baste my waistband to the skirt first, fix any gathers that I don't like, and then sew it down again. It's a little bit more work, but you end up with a better gathered product. Or if you don't care, just go for it. It'll be fine. Leave your basting in until you've tried on your skirt and you know that you like the gathers, how they're laying down. Once you're done testing the fit, making any changes, trim the seam allowance again, just so you have a less bulky waistband. And then we're going to press down that top edge and fold it under. And then I like to whip stitch this closed. So I take that inside waistband and just whip stitch it to the seam allowance of the dress. Now you can also do this by sewing machine, by stitching what's called stitching in the ditch, which is you just stitch in the in-between of where the waistband and gathered skirt meet, and you just stitch right along that line. Next up, we're going to make our waist tie. So grab your remaining bias. You should have enough to go around your waist and tie in a bow behind your back before you do this. If not, you need to cut more bias strips and attach them to the bias you already have. We're going to fold it kind of the opposite way that we pressed it. So we're almost unpressing it here if you've pressed it already. And then we're just going to sew down this line. I sewed about 3/8 of an inch in here. And then you're going to, as you get close to the middle, you're going to back tack and leave a 3 or 4 inch hole in the bias tape. And then keep going down the other side. And when you get to the end, you're just going to pivot and go along the corner. Next, we need to flip our waistband inside out. So what I recommend doing is trimming down the seam allowance and then using something like a marker or like a straw to thread on the inside, and then use a pencil and kind of stick it into the little hole in the top of the cap. And that makes it easier to turn this waistband inside out. So it just makes it a little bit easier to get over that first little portion when you're trying to get the thing to turn inside out. And we're going to repeat the same thing with the other side. Again, we're going to trim our seam allowances. I like to trim around the corners, especially just to make it a little bit easier to turn so I get a nice sharp point. And then we're going to pull that inside out. Then you want to press that down so that the waistband is nice and flat. And you will need to hand stitch the hole shut in the waistband. So just whip stitch that thing shut. And then you can thread it into your dress. I do my threading by taking a safety pin or anything that can kind of you can hold on to as you go, threading it through one hole and just kind of keep holding on to the safety pin as I pull that pin through the hole and around the garment. Now, if you're smart, you may have already put your waistband in the garment before you hand stitch down the inside. I was not smart and did not do that. Our instructions will tell you to do that though, so you should do it. Next up is our pocket. You're going to fold under the seam allowance on 3 edges of the pocket. After you've pressed the seam allowance in, which should be about 5/8 of an inch, you're going to press in 3/8 on the top and then another inch on the top edge, and you're going to sew that edge down. And you can see here I'm kind of folding it over all the way to the fold line and then kind of tucking in that 3/8. And then I'm just going to sew along that edge right there, and so that that line doesn't pop up. Next, mark your dots on your skirt. Line your pocket up to your skirt and pin it in place. If you are following our written instructions, we actually have you do this in the first step. It is so much easier to do if you do it in the first step. So follow the instructions as you're going along, and then you can stitch around the side, bottom, and other side to secure the pocket in place. I like to do a 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the pocket, and then I like to go back around and do a 1/4 of an inch so that it is double tacked down, just so it's nice and secure. And our last step here, or I guess second last step here, is optional. I am adding in a bit of tape here to secure the pockets. You could also use extra bias tape that's been made into a waistband tie. And all I'm doing is pinning it to the corners of the pockets on the inside of the dress. And I'm just going to hand stitch these from the pocket corners to the waistband. The only reason I'm doing this in particular is because I put really heavy things in my pockets, like my phone, and I want to make sure I'm not overstressing my fabric and like weighing it down too much. So it's just a little added security. And our last piece of this dress is the hem. The bottom hem is super easy to do. Just tuck in about 1/4 of an inch and then roll it up another inch or so and pin it down. You will have a tuck or two along the way. You can see I've kind of anticipated a tuck around the corners where the kind of curve of the skirt is a little too much. That's fine. It's on the inside. No one's going to know. And our last bit here, we are going to sew the skirt down. I'm going to sew this about 1 inch away from the edge, making sure that I am getting the folded edge on the inside. You can do this by kind of using your hand to feel for that folded edge. And you are done making your slice of life dress. And that is how we made the slice of life dress. And yes, at this point in filming, I now know the name of the dress. It took a little while to get there, but we're there. And if I look a little bit like a mess, it is because we have been hard at work designing, exporting, setting up the website, getting everything ready for this launch. And I am incredibly happy with how this process went of making this dress, filming, getting the pattern ready, and designing it. It has been incredibly gratifying, and I hope that you all enjoy this new pattern. I wear this dress all the time. It is a staple in my wardrobe already. I sometimes wear it multiple times a week just because it's comfy and it looks nice and it's so breezy, and it's perfect for the springtime weather. So I do plan on making another one here soon. After we launch this pattern, we're going to take a little short break, and I'm going to make this dress in a gingham print, which we will have that fabric on our site pretty soon here once I get inventory photos of it, and you can order that in the slice of life dress as well. As always, thank you for coming on this journey with me. I hope you check out our free patterns available for download on the website, ko.fabrics.com. The Slice of Life dress is available there for PDF download or printed. We will print and ship you a pattern if you don't like having to tape together your patterns. And if you want a sew along kit that has all the pieces that you need included in it, including buttons, interfacing, muslin, and we'll add on thread as well, and the correct yardage for your dress, you can order those kits on the site as well. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe to get all of our latest pattern releases. Bye.